Have you ever encountered a bully years later? How did it go? This happened to me in elementary school. This kid punched me in the chest. It was like 2nd grade, but I never forgot it. Apparently, he didn't either. Around high school age, 16 or so, I ran into him at a local minor league game. As soon as I saw him, I had a flashback to that moment. I said hey to him, asked how he had been, and then he says, "Do you remember that time I punched you in Ms. Woody's class?" I replied, "Yeah, actually, I do." Then he blew my mind with, "That was a crappy thing of me to do, and I want you to punch me back right now. I deserve it." Now, adult me would have said no and just accepted the apology, but 16-year-old me thought it sounded like an excellent idea. I agreed and punched him square in the chest. It hurt him a bit. I immediately felt like a huge butthole. Like, all of a sudden, I was the bully. I was down to the level he was back in 2nd grade. With that one punch, he became the bigger man. I immediately apologized to him. He accepted and we went on our separate ways. I really think I learned a couple of life lessons in that one moment. People grow up and revenge isn't always sweet. This happened to me in elementary school. This kid punched me in the chest. It was like 2nd grade, but I never forgot it. Apparently, he didn't either. With that one punch, he became the bigger man. So you lost both times. Ouch. Actually, one of the kids who used to pick on me worst in grade school ended up becoming one of my best friends after several years of non-contact. The first meeting after years, in a bar, went something like this. Him, "Yeah, sorry about that. Kind of a dong move on my part." Me, "Kids are buttholes. It happens." Him, "Cool. Let's drink." Had another bully, incidentally, send a random Facebook message out of the blue one day apologizing for his behavior, owing to some kind of karmic debt he felt he owed. Side note, I don't expect this story to go over particularly well, on account of everyone seems to want to hear a look who came out ahead in the end narrative, but I think my own is a nice story, and a reminder that at least some of those kids who picked on you in school were as young and stupid and confused as you were. Truth be told, my youth was pretty miserable, but in retrospect, I wouldn't have changed much, because I think it shaped who I am, and, in the end, I'm pretty happy with who I am. I was bullied in elementary school and HS, around the time I got glasses. Because of this there was this one guy I ended up bullying in HS. He was weaker and didn't really have any friends to help him. I never beat him up or anything, just scare him a little. Let him think I was going to hurt him, maybe even chase him around. This was about 18 years ago. If I ever had the chance I would certainly apologize to him. Having been bullied myself, I knew how wrong it was. I just didn't want to be the lowest man on the totem pole. I've tried looking him up on Facebook, hoping to apologize, but he has one of those very common names that gives you 1,000 results. I frequently think of him and hope he's led a fulfilling life. If you're out there, Jason, I am sorry. If you bullied him, he is probably on here. The guy that bullied me at school dropped dead age 18 in his mum's kitchen. Massive brain hemorrhage. 15 years later I still don't know how to feel about that. I was never bullied. I was not the bully. I was the guy that had friends in all the groups from the jocks to the geeks. Middle and high school was grand for me. I was really lucky. I did however have a friend that was bullied to no end. That I always seemed to be backing up and pulling out of trouble. To be honest, he was a little slow but had the biggest heart in the world. His last name was really odd and that did not help him at all. Anyway, I had not seen him for like 20 years. I was on a training some guys in a large city and was walking down the sidewalk and heard "Hey, reduced fat gif. Hey man." I turn around to see a well-dressed monster of a dude. I am talking 6 feet 5, 250 plus and running across the street towards me. Built like a brick shit house and sporting really heen suit, tie, and looked to be dressed like a CEO. I just stood there trying to place him. He gets up to me, tosses out a handshake and says it's me, full fat gif. As I look at this guy I can't believe my eyes. He looked like freaking Adonis. I am telling you, in high school this guy was as ugly as they come. Zits, skinny as a rail, sick all the time, just having a heck of a hard time. Come to find out they had him on all kinds of screwed up drugs as a kid and he was just really messed because of it. We caught a couple drinks at the corner pub and caught up right then and there. Turns out he got really lucky in the .com run, got out, and is now kicking it old school with his pile of money. By old school I mean he started up an Now the Go-Go company and was in the middle of venture capital push to secure more funds. I now have a standing offer to come to work if I ever want to move. Sometimes it pays off and karma comes back to you. I really was stunned and happy see that his life got turned around after they got him off the meds. Fixed a couple typos. That's awesome. Actually funny you should bring it up. I was a pretty good kid, not a fighter at all. Mid-30s now. In grade 7 there was this loud annoying bully that generally ignored me, but once shoved me backwards into his friend who was kneeling behind me waiting to trip me. Not expecting the sudden attack I went over his friend and smashed my head on the ground. I told him he was a dong and pretty much freaking hated that prick for the rest of middle school. Cut to 3 years later. He dies in a car accident. It didn't make me feel good in the slightest, but it was kinda weird to hear about and butthole that was mean for no reason dying a tragic death. Then in high school there was this airbag douche. He went to a different school, who attempted to fight me, only to be pulled off by a passing adult. In the process of getting dragged away he told me he was going to kill me. For the next 6 months I was terrified that this guy was going to stab me or something. I never ran into him. Cut to several years later, I'm working at a downtown gym, putting myself through college, and who walks in? Aforementioned douche. As fate would have it, I am now taller than him, and easily 50 pounds heavier. We exchange looks, he gets sheepish, and I say hey remember that time you said you were going to kill me? He looked down embarrassed and said, yeah man, sorry about that. I was such a dong back then. We both laughed. About 6 months later I see in the paper that died in a car accident with his wife. I was sad. Remind me not to mess with you. I was really popular early on in school until one day when this girl went around to all of my friends telling them that I hated them. Apparently that was enough to warrant 8 years of being teased and ignored by a class of only 70 something kids. At that point I was pretty badly teased. The worst thing that these kids tried to do to me, with this girl as their leader, was tell their parents that my dad abused me, which created a whirlwind of police drama for my family for no good reason. Anyway, I go to church once a year for the sake of my grandma and I guess this girl just happened to be there. She came up to me and apologized. She said she drove all of those people against me because at the time, everybody ignored her and she was jealous of my looks and popularity. I was mostly just astounded that anybody would even care at that age. Anyway, I wish I could say I was vindictive and did something really cool, but I didn't. I never really got my revenge. We exchanged Facebooks and it sounds like she is having a pretty hard life as it is. Despite the fact that I got the brunt of some really bad teasing. I sort of feel bad for ex-bullies. I think people underestimate how crappy it feels knowing you have caused somebody pain. There was a girl who bullied me through grades 3-5. I was by no means the only girl she picked on, and she got away with it every single time. Prime example, once a snake found its way into my mother's car. Florida it happens, and when she overheard me gleefully telling my friends about it, she told me that she had caught the snake and planted it in my backpack. A total lie, of course, but at age 7 I believed her. I was more scared of her than ever and did pretty much whatever she said. Of course, down the line I would have figured out that what she said was a total lie if I hadn't forgotten about it. It wasn't until I read her obituary last year that I remembered the situation. She was murdered and dumped in a motel after messing up a drug deal. So yeah. I hope they find out who murdered her and put a snake in his backpack. A girl picked on me at my first camping trip as a Girl Scout. I ran away and hid behind a tent to cry. Last week she sent me a friend request on Facebook. I ignored it. Lame geek. Ignored it. Like a boss. In middle school I had a kid a grade older than me harass me all the time in one of my classes. He made me dread going to that class, and I was still young enough to keep going. My senior year of high school I get a job at the local dinner theater, and it just happened that he worked as a waiter there as well. All of my memories of him trying to grab my junk and demean me in front of the other kids in our class came welling up. I avoided him the first 2 weeks until finally he confronts me and says, "Hi, I'm Jeremiah. I don't think we've met yet." I tell him, "Are you kidding me? You made my life a living heck for a full year." He gets this look of sincere pain on his face and says, "I am so sorry, man. I was a total jerk at that age and I fully apologize. What can I do to make it better?" We worked together for about a year and got along great. We still see each other from time to time too. So I'd say it went pretty well. I had this guy who started with me almost every day from 7th grade through high school. I'll call him Carl. Carl was about 6 feet 6 inches, and I was the next biggest kid that wasn't on steroids. I wasn't afraid to get in a fight with this kid, but I knew it would be the never-ending battle. If I beat him up, the next day, he'd probably bring a bat. If I took the bat away and beat him up again, he would probably bring a knife. I thought the guy had a screw loose, and it would just escalate, so I just avoided him as much as possible. My first summer back from college, I run into Cal at a party, where everyone is drinking. I figure, oh crap, all these years I've avoided this schmuck, and now I'm going to have his drunken butt start a fight. The opposite happened. He walks up to me and says, "I want to apologize for being a dong to you for all those years." I stood there in total and complete shock. I said, okay, but just curious. Why were you like that? He then completely opens up and tells me about how his father was smacking him around all those years, calling him crap all the time, and how he hated seeing me walk onto the bus or into school pretty content with things. We ended up talking for about an hour over a beer. Fast forward to about another year later. I'm taking a break from college, working out of town for this business setting up computers. I get a call from my dad asking, "Didn't you know Carl and go to school with him?" I say, "Yeah, why?" My dad tells me he is on the front page of the local paper in handcuffs. He confessed to killing his girlfriend. He beat her to death in a rage, and then drove to his parents' house and turned himself into the police. My reaction was simply no. Fast forward 19-20 years to today in 2010. Cole was released from prison on parole earlier this year and is now residing in a halfway house. I blame Cal for what he did, but I also blame his father for taking part of Carl's life and planting the rage in him through years of abuse that cost his girlfriend her life. I just think it's a shame, because for a moment there, I saw him trying to take a better path in life, even though he didn't. Take what lessons you will from this, if there are any to be taken from this tragedy. Thank God it wasn't Lenny. My high school bully runs a successful landscaping business, is uber buff and has a smoking hot girlfriend. They own a condo together. Meanwhile I am single and have 36k in university debts. How the frick do I compete with that? I used to get bullied all the time in school. In fact, it was so bad that years, even decades later, I used to sit alone in the dark and think up sweet revenge scenarios and act them out in my head. When none of them came to pass, I started to post them on the internet as if they actually happened. That sounds healthy. When I was in 6th grade, this girl used to rag on me really hard for reading Shakespeare and being nerdy. She was terrible all of school. Then I went to boarding school and came out of my shell. Fast forward to 2nd year of college. One of my best guy friends called me and asked if I could sell him a little weed cause this girl who was trying to frick him wanted to get high. Being the kind and curious friend, I say sure, bring her by and have my roommate let you in. I walk in and this bee is sitting on my bed. I walk in and just stared at her. She started talking really quickly, acting like it was so great to see me, etc. etc. I just looked at Jacob and said, "Get this bee out of my house." He looked at me, then looked at her and said, "Well, she drove, so I'll just stay over tonight. She can leave. Begone." And she left. We got high and played Mario Kart while she called him crying, wanting him to come hang out with her. I'd cry too if I got kicked out of somewhere and then discovered I'm missing out on Mario Kart. One of my bullies from grade school, oh, they were numerous, became my stepbrother. His dad married my mom and I met him for the first time at the wedding. Pretty weird to see your bully for the first time in 10 years in a church and wearing the same tux as you. We shook hands and didn't say anything about it because we were there for the family. Then, it was such a good time, and our two families melded together well. I started to get his history. His mother died when he was very young and he was raised mostly by his father. I started to understand him as the person behind the childhood bully, and it made sense. Bullies are people, too, and somebody's brother. A kid 2 years older used to pick on me all the time growing up, and was always bigger than me. Went with him to school from kindergarten through high school. I guess we got along at times, but for the most part he was a bully. Years later, in first year college, we had a house party and he showed up, which I was none too happy about. I knew the bastard would steal something. Next day, I couldn't find my jacket, and I knew he'd taken it. The jacket was special to me because my girlfriend at the time, now wife, had bought it for me. While I was with a friend, I saw him in the mall a couple weeks later and he was wearing it. I guess he hadn't realized that in the time since elementary school, I had actually become a pretty big guy, around 6 feet 0 and 180 pounds or so, while he was hovering around 5 feet 6 and maybe 160 pounds. I walked right up to him and told him bluntly, give me my freaking jacket. He just stared at me and tried to blow it off by saying something like, this is mine. I bought this, small town in backwoods Canada, and it was Old Navy brand. There isn't an Old Navy within 300 miles of there. I told him once more, give it to me. Now, he slowly took it off and handed it over to me. As he did, I said, yeah, that's right, which he uncomfortably chuckled at. Then I just walked away. Best part, his girlfriend was standing there the entire time just watching. Maybe it was his jacket and in reality you mugged him. Let's just say I am the product of the ugly duckling syndrome. I was awful, but grew up into an attractive woman. A boy in high school who I had a crush on used to pick on me, tease me, and make me feel awful. Flash forward to present day, 7 years later, and I find him applying for a job at my employer. He was shocked to see me, that's for sure. We chatted it up, had a nice conversation, and I learned that he was applying for a minimum wage job to make ends meet. He asked to take me out later that afternoon, and I simply said, no thank you, I am taken. You haven't apologized for bullying me in high school either, you know, and I smiled sweetly and left. The hiring manager called me later and asked what that was all about, because she was in earshot. I told her, no hard feelings. He was hired on. A boy in high school who I had a crush on used to pick on me, tease me, and make me feel awful. He probably liked you. Hey Mike, how are you doing? Oh hey Steve, I'm doing well, how are you? I'm doing GR. Yeah, I'm going to need a half pound of ham, sliced extra thin. Thanks buddy. Yes, went to high school with a guy who was viciously antagonistic. Not a physical bully so much as just constantly mocking certain people who he perceived to be below him in the social hierarchy. Like, cruel mockery, unending, constant, every second of every day. You just knew every time you passed him in the hallway you were going to hear the same crap, insults, etc. 10 or so years later I pull into my car dealership to get some service work done. The guy who comes out to greet me has a very familiar face. I wonder if it could be him. The name tag doesn't have his name on it, but the name it does have on it is something like Buddy or something like that, a nickname. So, I'm walking to the desk trying to decide if it's him or not. Then I see it. The hand. He has a very obvious birth defect related to his hand, and now I'm certain it's him. I don't even bother to bring it up, but I certainly savor every moment of him calling me sir and offering me coffee and a free ride to work. I read that as viciously agnostic and was very confused for far too long. There was a boy who used to pick on me in middle school and high school until he died in a flaming car wreck. Of course, he was a driver, drinking, and 2 others in the vehicle were injured. One of those is now pregnant, the other was in the hospital for 10 months. Anyway, all I could think about was that I didn't feel bad that he died. I didn't feel any remorse or sympathy for the still living family he had. I read in the papers that he was such a great kid and was so friendly and cheerful. No, he wasn't. He was not great and he certainly wasn't friendly. He was in butthole, and though I'm not glad that he's dead, I'm not discontented with the fact that he's not alive. A confusing emotion, this hatred for buttholes. Don't get in car wrecks, you'll end up pregnant. Saw one of my bullies several years back. She was fatter than she was in HS. which was pretty fat, married to white trash with kids, living the poor redneck life. I had a quiet little moment of smugness before going on about my day. I picked on a kid for a while in 8th grade. Our middle school was 6'8", so I guess I was finally on the top of the crap pile for once. I felt terrible about it later on in life. I ran into that kid about 10 years later at a bar. He was still nerdy and awkward. I bought him a drink, said yeah, I was in butthole back then, and we had a good evening of it all. Now he's one of my closest friends and he even let me know he was going to ask his GF to marry him before anyone else knew. TLDR, it's never too late to make things right. One of the many bullies that picked on me in high school ended up dating my cousin a few years after college. He never put 2 and 2 together. Me and my cousin have the same last names. So when we met again for the first time at a bar he looked pretty horrified. After exchanging pleasantries for a while, I honestly didn't really care about the bullying anymore. He took me aside and explained how deeply sorry he was and how he really loved my cousin. The man was practically begging for my approval. To be fair, he seemed like a reformed dude, so I kept reassuring him that it was all cool. This should have given me a ton of satisfaction, but for some reason it didn't. Like I said, I just didn't care anymore. I honestly believe that I got over the traumatizing bullying I went through in high school once I got to college. I remember being told there was a $2 protection fee by this guy and his buddy in a rundown neighborhood. I almost laughed because it was kind of cliche. Told him there was no way he is getting money out of me and that he was a waste of my time. Later in life I saw him at a crosswalk downtown, rundown jacket and clothing, sporting a pregnant wife and a child in a stroller. I actually thought about how much more valuable $2 was to him than I. Then I ran him over with my car. I like your style. She wound up going to the same college as me. She apologized to me for crap that was pulled years ago when she saw me on campus 3 years ago. This semester we awkwardly sit next to each other in con law class. I don't really speak to her. At least she was big enough to apologize. I was a bully, and the guy I bullied is one of the strongest, most self-confident guys I know, and holds no ill will towards me. In fact, he's one of my best friends now. He is an amazing dude, and I am an butthole. I met my old bully at my 10-year high school reunion. The early puberty advantage he had on me in 6th grade had clearly run its course as I was a good 6 inches taller than him. He was divorced, sporting a goatee, had a well-denied beer belly and spent the night bragging about his boat repair business. Just seeing his patheticness was reward enough for me. I was an elementary school bully. I was the biggest kid in class and a complete jerk up till the 6th grade. My JR high years sucked. For some reason I was now the smallest kid and paid dearly for my years of abuse. I got beat up several times, and was once hooked to the flagpole by my underwear and dragged up approximately 15 feet before the principal came out and ran the other kids off. Lesson learned. I bled. I deserved it. Changed me. Salutes your shorts. I guess this wasn't constant bullying, more of a one-time thing. In all honesty, I think this guy was just looking for someone to punch. As it happens that was me. I don't even recall what exactly happened. My friend had gone in a shop while I waited outside and I just remember him walking up to me, saying something and then punching me in the face. He was about 16 at the time and I was about 12. Not only did it hurt, it scared the crap out of me and I was scared to go out for quite a while afterwards. Turns out he tried to rob an old man a few months later. The poor old guy tried to defend himself and in a panic, the guy who punched me stabbed him in the head with a screwdriver, killing him instantly. He's serving a lengthy term in prison. It's been about 7 or 8 years of his life he's wasted now and I'm not afraid to say I hope he freaking rots in there. Why is everyone in here 6 feet 4 inches or taller? I guess no one tells those stories where you were the short kid and then you stayed short. Those stories aren't interesting. In middle school there was this kid who used to bully me. At one point I got a call from him asking me for homework help at 10 PM at night or some such hour. Bedtime for middle school me. I told him no. He calls me back, not 2 minutes later, saying his mom wants to speak to me. She asked me why I wouldn't help him. I told her that she wouldn't have helped him either if he treated her like he treated me in school. She said thanks and hung up the phone. I never had problems with him again. When I was little I was an absolute train wreck. Overweight, glasses, braces, that is, a chubby little target. When I was in first grade, these two 8th graders, Larry and whatever the other guy's name was, used to torture the heck out of me. The nuns were useless and ignored my broken stuff and general freaked out state no matter what I said. Fast forward about 15 years and I'm with this group of people, and who happens to be there? Larry. I sort of recognize him, but now he's about 5 feet 9 inches and maybe 160 pounds. Certainly not the giant he was in the playground. Anyway, I sort of steer the conversation to where are you from? Where did you go to school etc, and I can see the light bulb go on in his head. He's standing there staring at me. I should mention I'm now 6 feet 4 inches and about 230 pounds. Minus the glasses and braces of course. After a few really awkward seconds, the guy he was hanging out with says, "Hey, Larry, isn't it really funny that you used to torture this dude and now he could snap you like a freaking twig? That's pretty funny, right? I'd really like to see that." He said he was sorry. I said no worries. Sorry, that wasn't very exciting, but you would have needed to see the look on Larry's face. Yeah, a few of my ex-bullies are now my friends on Facebook. I have a hard time holding grudges about things that happened when we were 8. Most of them did the same thing I did after elementary school. Grew up, got a job, and raised a family. I've read a lot of posts that seem to conclude with some sort of moral retribution or apology. It's great to hear this because my only experience of bullying is awful. A boy at my school was bullied harshly for around a year. I never got to know him at all due to the streaming system of the school and was only made aware of his trouble when our year was called into an assembly to be told he had tried to kill himself. He never returned to school. Years later he appeared on the news for attempted murder in a shopping center where he worked and is now serving time in prison. He was obviously mentally unsound and I suspect he never really recovered from the abuse to which he was slave. The worst thing about this for me was that when the news story hit, the utter dongs who had bullied him all through school paraded the news story about social networking sites like a trophy. They reawakened his old names and had yet another laugh at his expense. Bullying is freaking terrible. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.